Jessica Crawford's name occasionally appeared in articles about the incident, but she had largely faded from public attention. She continued her work at the nonprofit in Oregon. She had given a few interviews about her journey, expressing genuine remorse and commitment to doing better. Some people forgave her, others never would. Marcus found himself in the first category, though he had never told her directly. He believed people could change if they truly wanted to. Jessica seemed to be trying. 2 years after the incident, federal legislation passed requiring airlines to implement standardized anti-bias training and establish independent complaint review systems. The law was nicknamed the Bennett Act by supporters, though Marcus had asked them not to name it after him. "This isn't about me," Marcus said when the law passed. "This is about everyone who has ever been discriminated against while traveling. This is about creating a society where people are judged by their character, not their appearance." The law wasn't perfect. Enforcement would be challenging. Some airlines would do the minimum required. But it was progress. Real, measurable progress. Marcus reflected on how far things had come. A painful 5-hour flight had transformed into a national movement. A viral video had sparked legislative change. One person's experience had validated millions of others' stories. He thought about Jessica Crawford sometimes. He wondered if she had truly changed or if she was just trying to rebuild her reputation. He hoped it was genuine change. The world needed people to learn and grow, not just be punished and discarded. But he also thought about all the Jessicas who had never been caught on camera. The people who discriminated every day without consequences. The systems that protected them. Those were harder to change than one flight attendant's behavior. Marcus's work continued. The Bennett Foundation expanded its programs internationally. Airlines in Europe, Asia, and South America adopted the training methods. The conversation about travel discrimination became global. 5 years after the incident, Marcus published a book. It was called The Hoodie and the Boardroom: Race, Class, and Respect in Modern America. The book explored how discrimination persisted regardless of wealth or status. It shared stories from hundreds of people who had faced similar experiences. It offered solutions for creating more equitable systems. The book became a bestseller. It was used in college courses. It sparked discussion groups and book clubs. It reminded people that the work of creating an inclusive society was never finished. In the final chapter, Marcus wrote about that flight. He described in detail what he had felt during those 5 hours. The anger, the hurt, the exhaustion of having to remain calm and dignified while being disrespected. He wrote about watching the video later and seeing himself through others' eyes. "I looked small in that video," Marcus wrote. "Not physically, but spiritually. I had tried to make myself invisible, hoping that would prevent more harassment. That's what discrimination does. It makes you shrink. It makes you question your own worth. It makes you tired." But then he wrote about what came after. The support from millions of strangers, the changes in policy and practice, the movement that emerged from one moment of caught-on-camera bias. "Pain can be transformed into purpose," Marcus wrote. "My experience on that flight was painful, but refusing to let that pain be wasted, using it to create change, that gave it meaning. That's what we all can do. Take our pain and build something better." The book ended with a call to action. If you witness discrimination, speak up. If you experience it, report it. If you have power, use it to create more equitable systems. Change doesn't happen by itself. It happens because people refuse to accept injustice. Marcus's story became part of a larger narrative about race in America. It was cited alongside other viral moments that had sparked conversations and changes. It was studied as an example of how social media could drive accountability. But for Marcus, it remained personal. It was the flight where he had been judged by his hoodie instead of his humanity. It was the experience that had reminded him that success didn't shield anyone from prejudice. It was the moment that had pushed him to do more, be more, and fight harder for a world where respect was universal. Years later, when people asked Marcus about that flight, he always said the same thing. "It was one of the worst experiences of my life. but it led to some of the most important work of my life. I wouldn't choose to go through it again, but I'm grateful for what came from it. And every time he flew, Marcus wore that same gray hoodie, not as a statement or a provocation, but as a reminder, to himself and to anyone watching, that a person's worth isn't determined by their clothes. That dignity isn't reserved for those who look a certain way. That respect should be given freely, without conditions. The video of that flight would exist forever on the internet. Future generations would watch it and hopefully learn from it. They would see how discrimination looked in 2025. They would study how one viral moment sparked systemic change. They would understand that progress required both outrage and action. Marcus hoped they would also see resilience, the ability to face injustice with grace, the choice to transform pain into purpose, the commitment to making things better for those who come after. That was his legacy, not the video, not the viral moment, but what he built from it, the systems he changed, the people he helped, the conversations he started, the world he made slightly better, one policy and one person at a time. The emergency room at Metropolitan General Hospital was busy that Tuesday morning. Nurses moved quickly between beds, checking on patients and updating charts. Doctors called out orders while families waited nervously in the crowded waiting area. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mixing with the sound of beeping monitors and hushed conversations. Marcus Thompson sat on bed 7, his hand pressed firmly against his chest. The pain had started an hour ago while he was working on a construction site. At first, he thought it was just heartburn from the spicy breakfast burrito he had eaten. But the pain grew worse. It felt like someone was sitting on his chest, making it hard to breathe. His coworker saw him struggling and called an ambulance right away. Now Marcus was waiting to see a doctor. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. His work clothes were covered in dust and concrete powder. He was scared, but he tried not to show it. At 42 years old, Marcus had always been healthy and strong. He worked hard 6 days a week to support his wife Angela and their 2 teenage daughters. The thought that something might be seriously wrong terrified him. Nurse Elena Rodriguez came to check on him for the 3rd time. She was a kind woman in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She could see that Marcus was in real pain. His face was pale and he was breathing in short, quick gasps. "How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson?" Elena asked gently, taking his blood pressure again. "The pain is getting worse," Marcus said quietly. "It hurts to breathe." Elena frowned as she looked at the numbers on the blood pressure monitor. They were not good. "I'm going to find the doctor right now," she said. "Just try to stay calm and breathe slowly." She hurried to find Dr. Richard Pemberton, who was supposed to be making rounds in the emergency room. Dr. Pemberton was a tall man in his late 50s with gray hair and an expensive watch. He had worked at Metropolitan General for over 15 years and was known as one of the best heart surgeons in the city. He had performed hundreds of successful surgeries and had won several awards. Other doctors respected him, and the hospital was proud to have him on staff. Elena found Dr. Pemberton near the nurses' station, talking to 3 young resident doctors who were training under him. They hung on his every word as he explained a complicated surgical procedure. "Dr. Pemberton, I need you to see the patient in bed 7 right away," Elena interrupted. "He's having severe chest pain and his blood pressure is elevated. I think it could be cardiac." Dr. Pemberton looked annoyed at being interrupted. "I'll get there when I get there, Nurse Rodriguez," he said coolly. "I'm teaching these residents something important." Elena wanted to argue, but knew it would not help. She walked back to Marcus and tried to keep him comfortable while they waited. 10 more minutes passed. The pain in Marcus's chest grew sharper. He felt like he might pass out. Finally, Dr. Pemberton walked over to bed 7 with his group of residents following behind him like ducklings. He did not look at Marcus right away. Instead, he picked up the chart hanging at the end of the bed and glanced at it quickly. "So what seems to be the problem today?" Dr. Pemberton asked in a bored tone, still not making eye contact with Marcus. "My chest hurts really bad," Marcus managed to say between difficult breaths. "It started about 2 hours ago. I can't breathe right." Dr. Pemberton finally looked at Marcus. His eyes moved slowly from Marcus's dusty work boots to his concrete-stained jeans and worn t-shirt. His expression changed to something that looked like disgust. "Chest pain. Dr. Pemberton repeated slowly. And what exactly were you doing when this pain started? Were you taking anything you shouldn't be taking? Marcus was confused. What do you mean? I was just working. I'm a construction worker. I'm sure you were, Dr. Pemberton said with a smirk. One of the residents behind him shifted uncomfortably. Let me guess, you're here hoping to get some pain medication, right? Maybe hoping for some good prescriptions? Marcus felt his face get hot with embarrassment and anger. No, sir. I really can't breathe. Something is wrong. Something is wrong, Dr. Pemberton mimicked mockingly. You know, we see this every single day. People coming in here, pretending to have chest pain just trying to get drugs. Do you have any idea how much it costs to run tests in this hospital? Do you even have insurance? Yes, I have insurance through my union, Marcus said, his voice shaking. He could not believe what was happening. He was in serious pain and this doctor was treating him like a criminal. Nurse Elena stepped forward. Dr. Pemberton, his symptoms are consistent with a cardiac event. We should at least run an EKG and check his cardiac enzymes. Dr. Pemberton turned to her with cold eyes. Nurse Rodriguez, I don't remember asking for your medical opinion. I'm the doctor here, not you. By this time, other patients in nearby beds were starting to pay attention. An elderly woman in the next bed looked shocked. A young man across the room pulled out his phone. Dr. Pemberton turned back to Marcus. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he demanded. You people need to stop wasting our time and resources. There are real patients here who actually need help. You probably ate too much fried food and now you think you're having a heart attack. Why didn't you just go to one of those free clinics instead of coming to a real hospital? Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. The pain in his chest was unbearable now, but the humiliation hurt even more. He had worked hard his whole life, paid his taxes, and never asked anyone for handouts. And now this doctor was treating him like garbage in front of everyone. I need help, Marcus whispered. Please. What you need is to take some antacids and stop wasting everyone's time, Dr. Pemberton said loudly. Nurse Rodriguez, give him some Tums and discharge paperwork. We have real emergencies to deal with. Just then, Angela Thompson rushed through the emergency room doors. She had been parking the car when Marcus was brought in. Her heart was pounding as she looked around frantically for her husband. When she spotted him on bed 7, she hurried over. Marcus, she called out. Then she heard Dr. Pemberton's voice loud and clear. And another thing, the doctor was saying, pointing his finger at Marcus. You need to take some personal responsibility for your health instead of showing up here, expecting us to fix all your problems. This is exactly what's wrong with people like you. Angela stopped in her tracks. Her mouth fell open. She could not believe what she was hearing. She looked at her husband's face and saw the pain and humiliation there. In that moment, something inside her snapped. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to open the camera app and press record. Excuse me, Angela said in a loud, clear voice. What exactly did you just say to my husband? Dr. Pemberton turned to face Angela with the same arrogant expression he had shown Marcus. He did not notice the phone in her hand at first. And you are? He asked in a dismissive tone. I'm his wife, Angela said firmly, holding her phone steady. The red recording light blinked on the screen. And I asked you a question. What did you just say to my husband? I was simply explaining to your husband that he's wasting valuable hospital resources, Dr. Pemberton said, crossing his arms. We have real emergencies here, and people like him come in claiming they're having heart attacks when they just want pain medication. People like him? Angela repeated, her voice getting louder. What exactly do you mean by that? Marcus tried to speak up. Angela, please, my chest. But the pain was so bad he could barely get the words out. He was struggling to breathe, his face turning a gray color that scared his wife. My husband is in pain, Angela shouted. He's clearly sick. Why aren't you helping him? Dr. Pemberton rolled his eyes. Ma'am, I'm a cardiovascular surgeon with over 20 years of experience. I think I know the difference between a real heart attack and someone seeking drugs. Your husband is fine. He's just being dramatic. He can barely breathe. Angela was shaking with anger now. Do your job. Run some tests. I don't take orders from you, Dr. Pemberton snapped. If you don't calm down, I'll have security escort you out of here. Angela kept her phone pointed at the doctor. Run the tests, she demanded. That's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? He has insurance. We can pay. Just help him. Dr. Pemberton leaned forward, speaking slowly as if Angela was stupid. Your husband ate some bad food or pulled a muscle at work. He does not need expensive cardiac tests. What he needs is to go home, take some antacids, and stop playing up his symptoms for attention. This is exactly the kind of behavior that drives up healthcare costs for everyone. Behind him, the 3 resident doctors looked extremely uncomfortable. One of them, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, tried to speak up. Dr. Pemberton, maybe we should at least do an EKG. It's a simple test and... Did I ask for your opinion, Dr. Chen? Dr. Pemberton interrupted sharply. You residents need to learn that not every patient who walks in here deserves the full treatment. You have to know who's really sick and who's just working the system. Nurse Elena could not stay quiet anymore. Dr. Pemberton, this man's blood pressure is dangerously high, he's sweating profusely, and he's having trouble breathing. These are classic signs of a cardiac event. We need to at least rule it out. Dr. Pemberton turned on her angrily. Nurse Rodriguez, this is your second warning. One more word and I'll file a complaint with your supervisor. I'm the physician here. I make the medical decisions, not you. Angela captured every word on her phone. The video was now almost 3 minutes long. Other patients in the emergency room were watching in shock. The elderly woman in the next bed was crying. A man across the room was also recording on his phone. Marcus suddenly grabbed his chest with both hands. His eyes rolled back and he started to slide off the bed. Angela screamed and dropped her phone on the bed to catch her husband. Nurse Elena rushed forward and helped lower Marcus back onto the bed safely. Get a crash cart, Elena yelled to another nurse. We need a cardiologist now. But Dr. Pemberton held up his hand. There's no need for dramatics. He's just hyperventilating because his wife got him all worked up. He's not breathing right. Angela was crying now, holding Marcus's hand. Please, somebody help him. Another doctor, Dr. James Mitchell, who had been treating a patient 2 beds over, came rushing over. He had heard the commotion and could see that something was seriously wrong. What's going on here? He asked. Nothing that concerns you, Mitchell, Dr. Pemberton said coldly. I'm handling this patient. But Dr. Mitchell ignored him and looked at Marcus. He saw the gray color of his skin, the way he was gasping for air, the sweat pouring down his face. This man needs immediate attention, Dr. Mitchell said. He turned to Elena. Get an EKG machine here now. Draw blood for cardiac enzymes. And page cardiology. I said I'm handling this, Dr. Pemberton insisted. And I'm saying you're wrong, Dr. Mitchell shot back. Step aside. Dr. Pemberton's face turned red with anger, but he stepped back. He looked around and finally noticed all the people watching. All the phones pointed in his direction. For the first time, he seemed to realize that he might have made a mistake. Angela picked up her phone from where she had dropped it on the bed. The recording had kept going the whole time. She stopped the video and immediately posted it to Facebook, tagging Metropolitan General Hospital. Her hands were still shaking as she typed. This doctor refused to help my husband who's having a heart attack. He called us drug seekers and said we were wasting resources. Is this how this hospital treats black patients? Within minutes, the video started getting comments and shares. Angela's friends shared it. Then their friends shared it. People who did not even know the Thompsons shared it because they were outraged by what they saw. The video showed Dr. Pemberton clearly saying that Marcus was playing up his symptoms, that he was just seeking drugs, and that he was wasting resources. It showed Marcus struggling to breathe, while the doctor refused to help. Meanwhile, Dr. Mitchell and Nurse Elena were working quickly. The EKG machine was rolled over and electrodes were attached to Marcus's chest. The machine started printing out a long strip of paper with jagged lines on it. Dr. Mitchell looked at it and his face went pale. He's having a heart attack, Dr. Mitchell said urgently. We need to get him to the cath lab right now. Elena, call the lab and tell them we have a STEMI coming up. STEMI meant a very serious type of heart attack where a major artery to the heart was completely blocked. Minutes mattered. Every second of delay could mean more damage to Marcus's heart, or even death. Dr. Pemberton stood frozen as the medical team sprang into action. Nurses came running with equipment. An orderly brought a gurney. They lifted Marcus onto it carefully while Elena held an oxygen mask over his face. How long has he been here? Dr. Mitchell demanded. Almost 2 hours, Elena said quietly. Dr. Mitchell's jaw clenched. 2 hours was a dangerously long time to wait for treatment during a heart attack. He did not say anything else, but everyone knew what he was thinking. As they wheeled Marcus toward the elevators, Angela walked beside the gurney, holding her husband's hand. Tears streamed down her face. "You're going to be okay, baby," she whispered. "They're going to help you now. Just hold on." Marcus could barely nod. The oxygen mask covered most of his face, but Angela could see the fear in his eyes. She squeezed his hand tighter. Behind them, Dr. Pemberton stood in the middle of the emergency room, suddenly very aware of all the eyes on him. He tried to look confident, but his hands were shaking slightly. He turned to his residents. "Let's continue rounds," he said, trying to sound normal. But none of the residents moved. Dr. Sarah Chen looked at him with disappointment in her eyes. "I think I need to excuse myself," she said quietly, and walked away. Back in the waiting room, Angela's phone would not stop buzzing. The video had been shared over 1,000 times in less than an hour. People were commenting with angry messages. Some were sharing their own stories about bad experiences at Metropolitan General Hospital. Others were calling for Dr. Pemberton to be fired. Local news reporter Jennifer Hayes was having lunch at a cafe near the hospital when her phone lit up with alerts. Several people had sent her the video. She watched it 3 times, her eyes getting wider each time. This was a major story. She grabbed her bag and rushed out of the cafe, calling her camera operator as she ran. "Meet me at Metropolitan General right now," she said. "We've got breaking news." By morning, protesters had gathered outside Metropolitan General Hospital. It started with just a dozen people holding homemade signs, but within hours the crowd grew to over 200. They stood on the sidewalk chanting and holding signs that read, "Black Lives Matter in Healthcare," and "Fire Dr. Pemberton and We Deserve Dignity." Reverend Marcus Williams stood at the front of the crowd with a megaphone. He was a tall man in his 60s who had led the local Baptist church for 30 years. He had marched with civil rights leaders in his youth and had never stopped fighting for justice. "We are here today because what happened to Marcus Thompson could happen to any of us," Reverend Williams called out. "How many of our brothers and sisters have been turned away from hospitals? How many have been denied care because of the color of their skin? How many have died because doctors didn't believe them when they said they were in pain?" The crowd responded with shouts of agreement. Cars driving past honked their horns in support. Some drivers pulled over and joined the protest. Inside the hospital, staff watched from windows. Some were angry at the protesters, feeling like everyone was being blamed for one doctor's actions. Others felt the protest was justified and even necessary. The hospital had always had problems, but no one had ever forced them to face it before. Tamika Johnson arrived at the protest around noon. She was the leader of the Coalition for Healthcare Equity, a local organization that fought for equal treatment in medical care. She was a powerful speaker, and when she took the megaphone from Reverend Williams, more people gathered to listen. "Let me tell you what we know," Tamika began. "We know that black patients are less likely to receive pain medication than white patients with the same injuries. We know that black mothers are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white mothers. We know that doctors often don't believe black patients when we say we're in pain. And now we know that Metropolitan General Hospital protected a racist doctor for 15 years while he harmed our community." The crowd erupted in anger. Someone started a chant, "No more silence, no more harm. Patients deserve equal care." News cameras captured everything. The protest was the lead story on every local news channel. National news networks started picking up the story too. By evening, Justice for Marcus was trending on social media across the country. Inside the hospital, the situation was getting tense. Some doctors felt like they were being unfairly attacked. During a staff meeting that afternoon, emotions ran high. Dr. William Bradford, a surgeon who had worked with Dr. Pemberton for 10 years, stood up to defend his colleague. "I've known Richard Pemberton for a decade," he said. "He's a brilliant surgeon who has saved countless lives. One bad moment captured on video doesn't erase all the good he's done. We're throwing him under the bus to please an angry mob." Several older doctors nodded in agreement, but Dr. Sarah Chen, the young resident who had been with Dr. Pemberton during the incident, stood up with tears in her eyes. "With respect, Dr. Bradford, I was there. I saw how he treated Mr. Thompson, and it wasn't one bad moment. I've been on rounds with Dr. Pemberton for 6 months, and I've seen him treat black and brown patients differently dozens of times. I thought it was just his personality, but now I understand it was racism, and I'm ashamed that I didn't speak up sooner." The room went quiet. Other residents and young doctors began to share their own observations. A pattern emerged. Dr. Pemberton was charming and helpful with white patients and families. But with Black and Latino patients, he was cold, rushed, and dismissive. Nurse Elena Rodriguez was at the meeting too. She had been working double shifts because the hospital was short-staffed and she was exhausted. But when she heard Dr. Bradford defending Dr. Pemberton, she could not stay silent. "I filed a formal complaint about Dr. Pemberton 8 months ago," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I reported that he had denied care to a patient who later ended up in intensive care. Do you know what happened to my complaint?" "Nothing. Dr. Grimes told me I needed to stay in my lane and let doctors make medical decisions. He warned me that if I kept causing trouble, it might affect my job." Other nurses began speaking up too. They shared stories of being ignored or punished when they questioned doctors' decisions. They talked about seeing patients suffer because they were too afraid to advocate for them. Some nurses cried as they spoke. Marcus Thompson was still in the hospital, recovering from emergency surgery. The cardiac team had managed to open the blocked artery, but the 2-hour delay had caused damage. Part of his heart muscle had died from lack of oxygen. He would need months of recovery and would likely never be able to do heavy construction work again. Angela sat by his bedside every day. She had barely slept since the incident. Her phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and people wanting to share their own stories. The video had now been viewed over 1 million times. On the 3rd day, Angela held a press conference in the hospital lobby. The hospital tried to stop her, but their lawyers said they had no legal right to prevent it. News cameras packed the small space. Angela stood at a microphone with Reverend Williams and Tamika Johnson beside her for support. "My name is Angela Thompson," she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. 3 days ago, my husband Marcus came to this hospital because he was having a heart attack. Instead of receiving immediate care, he was humiliated and denied treatment for 2 hours. The doctor who was supposed to help him called him a drug seeker. He implied my husband was lying about his pain. He treated my husband like he was garbage." Angela paused as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. She took a deep breath and continued. "Marcus survived, but he has permanent heart damage. The doctors say he'll never work the same way again. But you know what hurts more than that? The fact that this happened because of the color of his skin. My husband is a good man. He works hard. He provides for his family. He pays his taxes. He deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. Every patient who walks through those doors deserves that." She looked directly at the cameras. "This is not just about one doctor. This is about a hospital that protected that doctor for 15 years, while he harmed Black and brown patients. This is about a system that silences nurses and staff members who try to speak up. This is about all the Marcus Thompsons we don't know about, all the people who were turned away or died because they weren't believed." The room was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. "We are calling for Dr. Pemberton to be fired and to lose his medical license," Angela continued. "But that's not enough. We want a complete investigation of this hospital. We want policies changed. We want training for all staff on racial bias. We want a system where nurses can report bad behavior without fear of retaliation. We want oversight from the community. We want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." When she finished, reporters shouted questions. But Angela just shook her head and walked away, back to her husband's room. She had said what needed to be said. The press conference was played on every news channel that evening. The pressure on the hospital continued to grow. Local politicians facing election year pressure started making statements. The mayor called for an investigation. 2 city council members came to the protest. A state senator wrote a letter demanding accountability. Inside the hospital, staff were divided. Some doctors felt attacked and defensive. They worried that one mistake could now ruin their careers. Others felt relief that the problems they had seen for years were finally being addressed. The younger doctors and nurses, especially those who were Black, Latino, or from other minority backgrounds, felt empowered for the first time. They had always known the hospital had problems with racial bias, but speaking up had seemed impossible. Now the door was open. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, the board member, spent those days talking to hospital staff. She met with nurses, residents, janitors, and administrators. She heard stories that made her angry and sad. A Black nurse who had been passed over for promotion 5 times while less qualified white nurses were promoted. A Latino lab technician who heard doctors make racist jokes about patients. an Asian American doctor who was constantly mistaken for a nurse. The picture that emerged was of an institution with deep problems that went far beyond one racist doctor. The culture of the hospital had allowed discrimination to flourish for years. People had learned to stay quiet to protect their jobs. On the 5th day of protest, James Kim, the independent investigator, arrived at the hospital. He was a serious man in his early 40s with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He set up an office and began conducting interviews. He talked to over 50 people in the first week. Every conversation was recorded and transcribed. He reviewed years of complaint files, personnel records, and patient outcomes data. What he found shocked even him, and he had investigated many cases of institutional discrimination. 3 weeks after the incident, the hospital board held a formal hearing to decide Dr. Pemberton's fate. The hearing was closed to the public, but the board promised to release a summary of their findings afterward. The large conference room on the 10th floor had been set up like a courtroom, with tables for both sides and chairs arranged for witnesses. Dr. Richard Pemberton arrived 15 minutes early with his attorney, Marcus Flynn. Flynn was one of the best medical malpractice defense lawyers in the state. He wore an expensive suit and carried a thick briefcase full of documents. Dr. Pemberton looked tired. His face had aged in the past 3 weeks. He had not worked since the incident, staying home while protesters gathered outside his house and reporters called constantly. The board members took their seats at the front table. Board Chair David Morrison sat in the center, with Dr. Patricia Okonkwo to his right. The other 4 board members filled in the remaining seats. CEO Linda Chen sat to the side with the hospital's legal team. Investigator James Kim sat at a separate table with his laptop and several boxes of files. "This hearing is now in session," David Morrison announced. "We are here to review the conduct of Dr. Richard Pemberton and determine appropriate action. Mr. Flynn, you may begin with your opening statement." Marcus Flynn stood and buttoned his jacket. He was smooth and confident. "Thank you, Mr. Chair. My client, Dr. Richard Pemberton, has served this hospital with distinction for 15 years. He has performed over 2,000 successful heart surgeries. He has saved countless lives. He has taught and mentored dozens of young doctors. Yes, he had a bad day. Yes, he said things he regrets. But one bad moment captured on video and taken out of context should not destroy the career of an excellent physician." Flynn pulled out a stack of letters. "I have here testimonials from 57 patients whose lives Dr. Pemberton saved. I have letters from colleagues praising his skill and dedication. I have awards he has won for surgical excellence. This hearing should consider the totality of his career, not just 3 minutes of video." Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. "Mr. Flynn, you say the video was taken out of context. What context would make Dr. Pemberton's behavior acceptable?" Flynn did not miss a beat. Dr. Pemberton was under extreme stress that day. The emergency room was overcrowded. He had been working for 14 hours straight. He had just lost a patient on the operating table the night before. He was exhausted and overwhelmed. In that state, he made poor word choices and showed poor judgment. But it does not make him a racist. "Poor word choices?" Dr. Okonkwo repeated. "He told a man having a heart attack that he was seeking drugs. He refused to run basic tests that could have saved that man's heart from permanent damage. He said people like him were wasting resources. Those aren't just poor word choices." "Objection," Flynn said quickly. "Dr. Okonkwo is arguing rather than asking questions. If we're going to have a fair hearing, we need to follow proper procedures." David Morrison nodded reluctantly. "Dr. Okonkwo, please save your arguments for later. Let's hear from the investigator first." James Kim stood up with a thick folder in his hand. "Thank you. I was hired to conduct an independent investigation into this matter. Over the past 3 weeks, I have interviewed 73 people, including hospital staff, patients, and family members. I have reviewed 15 years of complaint files, personnel records, and patient outcome data. I have also analyzed the statistical patterns in Dr. Pemberton's care." He opened his laptop and projected a chart onto the screen. This chart shows the average wait times for patients seen by Dr. Pemberton in the emergency room over the past 5 years. Black patients waited an average of 93 minutes to see him. White patients waited an average of 41 minutes. Latino patients waited 87 minutes. The board members leaned forward to study the chart. This chart shows pain medication prescribed by Dr. Pemberton after surgery. Kim continued, clicking to the next slide. Black patients received adequate pain medication 62% of the time. White patients received adequate pain medication 91% of the time. He showed several more charts, each one showing a clear pattern of different treatment based on race. But statistics don't tell the whole story, Kim said. Let me share some of the testimony I gathered. He pulled out a folder. This is from Patricia Santos, a 45-year-old Latina woman. 3 years ago, she had heart surgery performed by Dr. Pemberton. The surgery went well, but afterward she was in severe pain. She repeatedly asked for pain medication, but Dr. Pemberton refused. He told her that people from her community had high rates of drug addiction and he wasn't going to contribute to the problem. She suffered for 8 hours until another doctor took over her care. Dr. Pemberton shifted in his seat but said nothing. This is from James Wilson, a 62-year-old black man. Kim continued. He came to the emergency room with a broken arm. Dr. Pemberton made him wait 6 hours before setting the bone. Mr. Wilson heard Dr. Pemberton tell a nurse that patients with Medicaid always had to wait because they paid less. This is from Maria Gonzalez. This is from David Brown. This is from Ashley Chen. Kim kept pulling out folders. I have documented testimony from 28 different patients, all people of color, all describing similar experiences with Dr. Pemberton. Marcus Flynn stood up. These are just allegations. There's no proof. That race was the motivating factor in any of these cases. My client treated patients based on medical necessity, not skin color. Then how do you explain the statistics? Dr. Okonkwo demanded. How do you explain that black patients consistently had worse outcomes under his care? Socioeconomic factors. Flynn answered smoothly. Black patients often have other health issues, less access to primary care, higher rates of obesity and diabetes. These factors affect outcomes, not racism. That might explain some difference, Kim interjected. But the statistics show that Dr. Pemberton's black patients had worse outcomes than black patients treated by other doctors at this same hospital. The difference is not socioeconomic factors. The difference is Dr. Pemberton. The room went silent. Flynn looked less confident now. There's more, Kim said. I also reviewed complaints filed by hospital staff. Nurse Elena Rodriguez filed a formal complaint 8 months ago. She reported that Dr. Pemberton had denied care to a black patient with pneumonia. The former chief of staff, Dr. Harold Grimes, dismissed her complaint and warned her about overstepping her role. That patient ended up in intensive care 2 days later. He pulled out another file. Nurse Jennifer Park filed a complaint 2 years ago. She reported that Dr. Pemberton made inappropriate comments about Asian patients, saying they were too passive and didn't advocate for themselves enough. Her complaint was also dismissed. I found evidence of 12 complaints filed by staff members over the years, Kim continued. All dismissed. Some of the staff members who filed complaints were later transferred to less desirable shifts or passed over for promotions. The message was clear. Don't speak up about Dr. Pemberton. David Morrison looked troubled. Dr. Grimes is retired now, so we can't question him about this. But it's clear there were serious failures in our complaint process. May I call a witness? Kim asked. Go ahead. Nurse Elena Rodriguez entered the room. She wore her blue scrubs and looked nervous. She had never been in a hearing like this before. Ms. Rodriguez, can you tell the board what you witnessed on the day of the incident? Kim asked. Elena took a deep breath. I was working in the emergency room. Mr. Thompson came in with severe chest pain. His blood pressure was very high, and he was having trouble breathing. I knew something was seriously wrong. I went to find Dr. Pemberton and told him I thought the patient was having a cardiac event. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Dr. Pemberton seemed annoyed that I was interrupting him. When we got to the patient's bed, he barely looked at Mr. Thompson. He immediately started accusing him of seeking drugs. He refused to order an EKG or cardiac enzyme tests. I tried to suggest that we should at least rule out a heart attack, and Dr. Pemberton told me to stay in my lane. And this was not the first time you had concerns about Dr. Pemberton's treatment of minority patients, Kim prompted. No, sir. I had seen similar behavior many times. But the incident 8 months ago was the worst. A patient named Robert Harris came in with pneumonia. He was very sick. His oxygen levels were low. I thought he needed to be admitted. But Dr. Pemberton said he was fine to go home with antibiotics. I filed a formal complaint because I was worried about the patient. 2 days later, Mr. Harris collapsed at home and had to be rushed to the ICU. And what happened after you filed that complaint? Elena's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Grimes called me into his office. He told me that I needed to remember my place. He said nurses don't question doctors' medical decisions. He said if I continued to cause problems, it would affect my career here. After that, I stopped filing complaints. I was afraid of losing my job. Dr. Okonkwo looked angry. You were punished for trying to protect a patient? Yes, ma'am. Marcus Flynn stood up. Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it true that you had a personal conflict with Dr. Pemberton? That he had criticized your work on several occasions? Elena nodded. Yes, he criticized me often, but only when I was caring for Black or Latino patients. When I cared for white patients, he never had any complaints about my work. Flynn started to ask another question, but Dr. Pemberton suddenly stood up. His face was red and he looked angry. I'm not going to sit here and be called a racist, he said loudly. Dr. Pemberton, please sit down, David Morrison said firmly. But Dr. Pemberton did not sit. His composure, which he had maintained throughout the hearing, finally cracked. I have dedicated my life to medicine. I have saved thousands of lives, and now I'm being destroyed because of political correctness and angry mobs on social media. This is a witch hunt. Dr. Pemberton, that's enough, his attorney Marcus Flynn said, trying to pull him back to his seat. But Dr. Pemberton pushed his hand away. No, I'm going to say what needs to be said. That man in the video was acting suspicious. He was probably on drugs. I see it all the time. These people come in here expecting us to fix all their problems they created with their own bad choices. And now we're supposed to pretend that everyone deserves the same level of care? The room went completely silent. Even Flynn looked shocked. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo stood up slowly. These people? She repeated quietly. What people exactly? Dr. Pemberton seemed to realize he had gone too far, but the damage was done. I didn't mean it like that, he said, but his voice was weak. I think you meant it exactly like that, Dr. Okonkwo said. Thank you for finally being honest. Investigator James Kim pulled out one more file. Since Dr. Pemberton has chosen to speak, perhaps this is a good time to share something else I found. During my investigation, I was given access to Dr. Pemberton's work emails. He had several exchanges with other doctors that are relevant to this case. He pulled up an email on the screen. This is from 2 years ago. Dr. Pemberton wrote to a colleague after treating a Black patient in the emergency room. I'll read just one line. Had to deal with another one today claiming chest pain. Why do they always come in at the end of my shift? Probably just wants a bed for the night. He clicked to another email. This one is from last year. Quote, the Latino patients are the worst. They always bring their entire extended family and make such a drama over everything. Dr. Pemberton's face went pale. Those emails were private conversations between colleagues. You had no right to look at those. They were sent on hospital email servers, Kim replied, which means they belong to the hospital, not to you. And they show a clear pattern of racial bias. Flynn was frantically whispering to his client, trying to salvage the situation, but everyone in the room knew it was over. David Morrison looked at his fellow board members. Does anyone need more time to make a decision, or are we ready to vote? I'm ready to vote, Dr. Okonkwo said immediately. The other board members nodded in agreement. Very well, David said. We will now vote on whether to terminate Dr. Pemberton's employment at Metropolitan General Hospital and report him to the State Medical Board for license review. One by one, the board members raised their hands. All 6 votes were in favor of termination. It was unanimous. Dr. Pemberton stood frozen for a moment, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. His attorney gathered his papers and hurried after him. After they left, the board members sat in silence for a moment. Finally, David Morrison spoke. We need to do more than just fire one doctor. This hearing has made it clear that our hospital has deep problems. We need real change. Agreed, said Robert Chen, the board's lawyer. We're going to face lawsuits from patients Dr. Pemberton harmed. But more importantly, we need to make sure this never happens again. Dr. Okonkwo pulled out a document she had prepared. I've been working with the Coalition for Healthcare Equity on a reform proposal. I'd like the board to consider it. She distributed copies to everyone at the table. First, we need mandatory training on implicit bias and cultural competency for every staff member, from doctors to janitors. Not a one-time thing, but ongoing training every year. David nodded. Agreed. Second, we need to completely overhaul our complaint process. Staff and patients need to be able to report concerns without fear of retaliation. We should establish an independent patient advocate office that reports directly to the board, not to the doctors. That makes sense. Margaret Ellis, the former nurse, agreed. The current system protects doctors instead of patients. Third, we need to start collecting and analyzing data on patient outcomes by race, Dr. Okonkwo continued. We should review this data quarterly to identify any disparities in care. If we see patterns like we saw with Dr. Pemberton, we need to address them immediately. Fourth, we need to diversify our medical staff and leadership. Right now, 78% of our doctors are white, in a community that is 42% people of color. We need to actively recruit and promote doctors and nurses from diverse backgrounds. And finally, she said, we need community oversight. We should establish a community advisory board that includes patients and community leaders. They should have real power to review our policies and hold us accountable. David looked around the table. These are significant changes. They will require time and money. The alternative is to keep doing what we've been doing, Dr. Okonkwo said, and we've seen where that leads. More patients harmed, more lawsuits, more protests. We can either change voluntarily or be forced to change. I'd rather we do it voluntarily. The board voted to approve the reform package that same day. Linda Chen, the CEO, held a press conference the next morning. Standing at a podium outside the hospital, with protesters still gathered behind barriers, she read a prepared statement. Yesterday, the Board of Metropolitan General Hospital voted unanimously to terminate Dr. Richard Pemberton's employment. We have also reported his conduct to the State Medical Board. We acknowledge that this action, while necessary, is not sufficient. Our investigation revealed systemic failures that allowed discrimination to persist for years. We failed our patients. We failed our staff. And we are committed to doing better. She announced the reform package, explaining each component in detail. These changes are just the beginning. We are committed to becoming a hospital that provides excellent, equitable care to every patient, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The crowd of protesters listened quietly. When Linda finished, Tamika Johnson from the Coalition for Healthcare Equity stepped forward to the microphone that had been set up for community response. We are cautiously hopeful about these announcements, Tamika said, but we have heard promises before. We will be watching closely to make sure these reforms are actually implemented. We will be part of that community advisory board, and we will hold this hospital accountable. Reverend Williams also spoke. Marcus Thompson is still recovering from the damage done to his heart because of Dr. Pemberton's racism. No policy change can undo that harm, but perhaps his suffering can lead to something good. Perhaps it can make sure no one else has to go through what he went through. Inside the hospital, reactions were mixed. Some doctors felt the changes went too far, that the hospital was overreacting to please activists. But most staff members, especially nurses and younger doctors, felt relieved. Finally, the problems they had seen for years were being addressed. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo was named to lead the hospital's new Office of Health Equity. She left her private practice to take the position full-time. Her first action was to meet with every staff member who had filed a complaint that was dismissed over the years. She listened to their stories and apologized on behalf of the hospital. Nurse Elena Rodriguez was promoted to be the first patient advocate focused specifically on equity issues. She would have the power to review any case where she suspected discriminatory treatment and could report directly to the board. Marcus and Angela Thompson were invited to join the new community advisory board. At first, Angela was not sure she wanted to remain involved with the hospital that had harmed her husband, but Marcus convinced her. If we walk away, nothing changes, he told her as they sat together in their living room. He was home from the hospital now, recovering slowly. His heart would never be the same, and he could not return to construction work. But he was alive. We can make sure this doesn't happen to someone else, Marcus continued. That's worth something, so Angela agreed. She attended her first advisory board meeting 6 weeks after the incident. It was strange to walk back into Metropolitan General Hospital, but this time she was not there as a patient's wife. She was there as someone with power to change things. Marcus Flynn stood up. "Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it true that you had a personal conflict with Dr. Pemberton? That he had criticized your work on several occasions?" Elena nodded. "Yes, he criticized me often, but only when I was caring for Black or Latino patients. When I cared for white patients, he never had any complaints about my work." Flynn started to ask another question, but Dr. Pemberton suddenly stood up. His face was red and he looked angry. "I'm not going to sit here and be called a racist," he said loudly. "Dr. Pemberton, please sit down," David Morrison said firmly. But Dr. Pemberton did not sit. His composure, which he had maintained throughout the hearing, finally cracked. "I have dedicated my life to medicine. I have saved thousands of lives, and now I'm being destroyed because of political correctness and angry mobs on social media. This is a witch hunt." "Dr. Pemberton, that's enough," his attorney Marcus Flynn said, trying to pull him back to his seat. But Dr. Pemberton pushed his hand away. "No, I'm going to say what needs to be said. That man in the video was acting suspicious. He was probably on drugs. I see it all the time. These people come in here expecting us to fix all their problems they created with their own bad choices. And now we're supposed to pretend that everyone deserves the same level of care?" The room went completely silent. Even Flynn looked shocked. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo stood up slowly. "These people?" she repeated quietly. "What people exactly?" Dr. Pemberton seemed to realize he had gone too far, but the damage was done. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, but his voice was weak. "I think you meant it exactly like that," Dr. Okonkwo said. "Thank you for finally being honest." Investigator James Kim pulled out one more file. "Since Dr. Pemberton has chosen to speak, perhaps this is a good time to share something else I found. During my investigation, I was given access to Dr. Pemberton's work emails. He had several exchanges with other doctors that are relevant to this case." He pulled up an email on the screen. "This is from 2 years ago. Dr. Pemberton wrote to a colleague after treating a Black patient in the emergency room. I'll read just one line. Had to deal with another one today claiming chest pain. Why do they always come in at the end of my shift? Probably just wants a bed for the night." He clicked to another email. This one is from last year. Quote, "The Latino patients are the worst. They always bring their entire extended family and make such a drama over everything." Dr. Pemberton's face went pale. Those emails were private conversations between colleagues. "You had no right to look at those. They were sent on hospital email servers," Kim replied, "which means they belong to the hospital, not to you. And they show a clear pattern of racial bias." Flynn was frantically whispering to his client, trying to salvage the situation, but everyone in the room knew it was over. David Morrison looked at his fellow board members. "Does anyone need more time to make a decision, or are we ready to vote?" "I'm ready to vote," Dr. Okonkwo said immediately. The other board members nodded in agreement. "Very well," David said. "We will now vote on whether to terminate Dr. Pemberton's employment at Metropolitan General Hospital and report him to the State Medical Board for license review." One by one, the board members raised their hands. All 6 votes were in favor of termination. It was unanimous. Dr. Pemberton stood frozen for a moment, then turned and walked out of the room without another word. His attorney gathered his papers and hurried after him. After they left, the board members sat in silence for a moment. Finally, David Morrison spoke. "We need to do more than just fire one doctor. This hearing has made it clear that our hospital has deep problems. We need real change." "Agreed," said Robert Chen, the board's lawyer. "We're going to face lawsuits from patients Dr. Pemberton harmed. But more importantly, we need to make sure this never happens again." Dr. Okonkwo pulled out a document she had prepared. "I've been working with the Coalition for Healthcare Equity on a reform proposal. I'd like the board to consider it." She distributed copies to everyone at the table. "First, we need mandatory training on implicit bias and cultural competency for every staff member, from doctors to janitors. Not a one-time thing, but ongoing training every year." David nodded. "Agreed." "Second, we need to completely overhaul our complaint process. Staff and patients need to be able to report concerns without fear of retaliation. We should establish an independent patient advocate office that reports directly to the board, not to the doctors." "That makes sense," Margaret Ellis, the former nurse, agreed. The current system protects doctors instead of patients. Third, we need to start collecting and analyzing data on patient outcomes by race, Dr. Okonkwo continued. We should review this data quarterly to identify any disparities in care. If we see patterns like we saw with Dr. Pemberton, we need to address them immediately. Fourth, we need to diversify our medical staff and leadership. Right now, 78% of our doctors are white, in a community that is 42% people of color. We need to actively recruit and promote doctors and nurses from diverse backgrounds. And finally, she said, we need community oversight. We should establish a community advisory board that includes patients and community leaders. They should have real power to review our policies and hold us accountable. David looked around the table. These are significant changes. They will require time and money. The alternative is to keep doing what we've been doing, Dr. Okonkwo said, and we've seen where that leads. More patients harmed, more lawsuits, more protests. We can either change voluntarily or be forced to change. I'd rather we do it voluntarily. The board voted to approve the reform package that same day. Linda Chen, the CEO, held a press conference the next morning. Standing at a podium outside the hospital, with protesters still gathered behind barriers, she read a prepared statement. Yesterday, the Board of Metropolitan General Hospital voted unanimously to terminate Dr. Richard Pemberton's employment. We have also reported his conduct to the State Medical Board. We acknowledge that this action, while necessary, is not sufficient. Our investigation revealed systemic failures that allowed discrimination to persist for years. We failed our patients. We failed our staff. And we are committed to doing better. She announced the reform package, explaining each component in detail. These changes are just the beginning. We are committed to becoming a hospital that provides excellent, equitable care to every patient, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. The crowd of protesters listened quietly. When Linda finished, Tamika Johnson from the Coalition for Healthcare Equity stepped forward to the microphone that had been set up for community response. We are cautiously hopeful about these announcements, Tamika said, but we have heard promises before. We will be watching closely to make sure these reforms are actually implemented. We will be part of that community advisory board, and we will hold this hospital accountable. Reverend Williams also spoke. Marcus Thompson is still recovering from the damage done to his heart because of Dr. Pemberton's racism. No policy change can undo that harm, but perhaps his suffering can lead to something good. Perhaps it can make sure no one else has to go through what he went through. Inside the hospital, reactions were mixed. Some doctors felt the changes went too far, that the hospital was overreacting to please activists. But most staff members, especially nurses and younger doctors, felt relieved. Finally, the problems they had seen for years were being addressed. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo was named to lead the hospital's new Office of Health Equity. She left her private practice to take the position full-time. Her first action was to meet with every staff member who had filed a complaint that was dismissed over the years. She listened to their stories and apologized on behalf of the hospital. Nurse Elena Rodriguez was promoted to be the first patient advocate focused specifically on equity issues. She would have the power to review any case where she suspected discriminatory treatment and could report directly to the board. Marcus and Angela Thompson were invited to join the new Community Advisory Board. At first, Angela was not sure she wanted to remain involved with the hospital that had harmed her husband, but Marcus convinced her. If we walk away, nothing changes, he told her as they sat together in their living room. He was home from the hospital now, recovering slowly. His heart would never be the same, and he could not return to construction work. But he was alive. We can make sure this doesn't happen to someone else, Marcus continued. That's worth something, so Angela agreed. She attended her first advisory board meeting 6 weeks after the incident. It was strange to walk back into Metropolitan General Hospital, but this time she was not there as a patient's wife. She was there as someone with power to change things. The reforms took time to implement. There were setbacks and resistance. Some doctors quit rather than participate in bias training. A few board members wanted to slow down the changes, but Dr. Okonkwo and the Community Advisory Board pushed forward steadily. 3 months after the incident, the hospital completed its first quarterly review of patient outcomes by race. The data showed improvements in wait times and pain medication prescriptions. The disparities had not disappeared completely, but they were getting smaller. 6 months later, the hospital hired 15 new doctors, including 8 people of color. They also promoted several nurses and created new leadership positions focused on patient advocacy and equity. The story made national news. Other hospitals facing similar problems reached out to Metropolitan General to learn about their reforms. Dr. Okonkwo was invited to speak at medical conferences around the country. The policies that started as a response to one terrible incident became a model that other institutions could follow. Dr. Richard Pemberton's medical license was suspended by the state medical board after a review. He appealed the decision, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He eventually moved to another state, where he tried to practice medicine but found that his reputation followed him. The video had been seen by millions of people. No hospital wanted to hire a doctor known for racism. For Marcus Thompson, life slowly returned to a new normal. He could not do construction work anymore, but he found a job as a safety inspector, checking construction sites to make sure they followed proper regulations. The work was less physically demanding and he was good at it. His daughters were proud of their parents. The older one wrote a school essay about her father's courage in speaking up about discrimination. The younger one told her friends that her mom was a hero for recording the video and demanding change. Angela still had the video saved on her phone, though she rarely watched it anymore. Sometimes reporters asked to interview her, especially when the anniversary of the incident came around. She always said yes because she wanted people to remember what had happened and why it mattered. 1 year after the incident, Metropolitan General Hospital held a community event to showcase the changes they had made. Marcus and Angela were invited as special guests. They walked through the emergency room where it had all happened, and Marcus felt a mix of emotions. This place had been the site of his worst experience, but it had also led to real change. A young black doctor stopped them in the hallway. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? I just wanted to thank you. I was hired as part of the new diversity initiative. If you hadn't spoken up, I might not have this opportunity." Angela squeezed Marcus's hand. It had been a long, difficult year, but moments like this made it worthwhile. One terrible incident had become a catalyst for change, proving that accountability was possible when people refused to stay silent.